right, hello everybody, and welcome to your Monday lighting critique. We've got a few stills to go through here. We've got a couple. We've got a flying rabbit inspired piece by Clarissa. We've got Nathania coming at us with a non-photorealistic rendering with a crosshatched look, and we've got Theo with the first. As far as I'm aware, as far as I remember, this is Theo's first project. So we've got Clarissa here live. So we'll start with Clarissa. You were knocking your drawing skills from a few years ago. I think it's pretty stinking good. It's a pretty cool. It's a really cool concept. It's nice and simple. The fact that you've never done a fur groom before is very impressive. I think this is looking really good from that standpoint. There's something about, and this is more of a shader thing. I would check the color of a rabbit's ears. And just like the transition point between the furry edge and the ear itself, it just feels like this is very bright. That would be the, and that's like I said, that's more of a material thing than a shader thing. In terms of the groom itself, I think it looks good. I'm a bit of a layman when it comes to fur groom stuff, so definitely ask our others in the community, but some things that I was curious about was like this long like kind of eyelash that's coming out. Like I don't know, like it makes sense with the whiskers, but I don't know, do they have those like long eyelashes? Just something to be aware of. And additionally, like it looks like there's some grass kind of penetrating the feet there, so to watch out for that. But in terms of the groom itself, like it kind of makes sense. You've got this really nice kind of like dusty white look to the skin, to the fur. You've got like the gray fur over here. Oh, my other tip for you with doing fur grooms is make sure to paint the skin underneath the same color as kind of the fur on top of it. It just helps you hide some of these, like because when we kind of get into here, we're starting to like look straight down the groom, and so you can kind of see the skin, and then the skin pops through if it's this color. But if it matches the fur color, you won't notice it as much. It's just a little trick I've seen done that works out well. In terms of the lighting and the look of this, I think that you mentioned whether or not to add the little points of light. I actually think they kind of add a nice colorful component to this, and you can design the color scheme in a way that will enhance the colors of the butterfly wings a little bit, like kind of keep, maybe they're all kind of in that color palette. But the thing that I like about it is it gives some motivation to add more color to our pretty monochromatic, like it's a white and gray bunny, so there's not a lot of color on the bunny itself. And I think it just allows us the opportunity to add like pockets of light to the background and pockets of light to the character. In terms of the lighting on the character, the one big thing that I would focus on, and like I said, I know you've got some other stuff you're doing, is just kind of the value of it. So right now when we look at this, and this is the little trick I do where I add just a black layer in Photoshop and make it a color over operation. And what this will do, or color layering operation, I should say. And what this does is this allows us to look at the luminance of the image. And you've got a little bit of extra luminance here on the tip of the nose, and that's great. But overall, it's feeling like if we look at the levels on the image itself, like it feels like everything is kind of shifted towards the darks. And if I took this and just kind of like brightened it up a little bit, like it doesn't need to be overly super bright. Like this is probably, when I take this off, probably too bright. But actually it's not. But I want to see more value range in there. So I would say push the key light a little bit harder. Yeah, and then it's gonna be about getting the color scheme to work in there. So if you do decide to add those in there, we can play with that. I don't want to give too many notes, but the other thing would be just, we've got an opportunity with these like big, beautiful, translucent wings. Like it would be nice to have like a spill of this purple onto the fur in here too, just kind of spill through that. But yeah, so I think you're well on your way. I don't want to give too many notes because I think there's still some question marks in terms of where you go with the groom and the final look of the piece. So I will say, once you make the final determination on the little points of light around, then we can start designing it more from there. But the biggest things I would work on with the next iteration would be to making sure that your value range is nice, making sure that we've got some bleed from those wings onto the fur, and then making sure that we're having the opportunity to add the color that we want to, whether it's from the night sky or the little bulbs of light into the fur of the character, because it's so like white and gray. It'll really, really kind of ingest all the color that's going on around it. So those would be my main points to focus on. If you're able, are you able to unmute? Are you here?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, for sure. How, does that make sense? Is that kind of what you were looking for?
It does, thank you. I was wondering though, how do I make the fairy lights? Because the only thing I can think of is mesh lights, but I know that people try to like avoid those.
Correct. Yes. So mesh lights are good in some instances, but for the most part, they create a lot of noise. For me, I would do it. With a. I would put an object in there, like a sphere, with a glowy element to it, like an emission. But actually, as a light source, you can use a point light or something over there to kind of be the light source that comes out of it, right? So it actually, what it is two different things. It's the thing that we're seeing that's glowing, and that's built into the shader, and then the thing that's actually emitting light, and that's our little point light that's over there. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. This is great though. This is going to be fun. This is a very cool project. Yeah. All right, great. All right, let's move on. Next up, we have Nathania. So, like I said, you are going to be adding your own take on this, or your lighting on top of this. But in terms of the crosshatch look, I think it looks great. It feels at this point very 2D, which I think is the look that we're going for. The next step is just adding the lighting, right? Where do we want? Because now we've got such a great blank slate of the room, and right now everything's kind of the same across the room from left to right and top to bottom. So now it's like really, really about where's our focus going, what type of mood do you want to create. Obviously the cross hatches increase as we get into more shadow areas. So like, how dark do we make some of the shadow areas? How bright do the brights get? Are we going to start infusing some color into this, or is it going to be like just kind of a variations of browns but lights and darks? But the big thing about this is that's difficult. That'll be your challenge on this probably is that when you make something, when you start at this point, you kind of love everything, right? Like you've made this thing, it's a little bit precious to you. What's going to be hard is you're going to have to put some of these areas into darkness probably to get the focus the way that we want. And that'll be hard for you because you're like, I made these books look cool, and like to get some of them to fall into darkness. So allow that to happen and recognize when you're trying to make things brighter. The other thing is it looks like you have some reference of the look itself, and I think it's great. And you can see like there's a lot of light to dark fall off things going on here, like a lot more range in it. I would, if there's any scenes that are using this style, that would be really good too, to reference the look and cross an entire scene on this. Like I said, how dark the darks get, how bright the brights get, just so we can start playing with that. But very, very cool, very ambitious project, and definitely a unique take on this that I didn't see coming. So very cool on that. All right, and then last up for today, we have Theo. Theo, like I said, I think this is Theo's first submission, if I recall correctly. So a few things about this. It's similar to what we were talking about with Clarissa's in terms of, I think the big thing that you're gonna work on here is getting the character to pop off the background. That would be the main thing that I would have you focus on right now, because I think we're getting a good sense of the setting and the scene. But the character and his eyes are popping off the screen nicely, but he himself is really bent, like we're losing him in the environment. And one way to check that is I always talk about like squinting your eyes at the image and seeing if we lose it. Another one is, since we have it in Photoshop, we can just blur it a little bit. And we can see we're kind of focusing on these light sources that go back, and then the character himself his tones kind of get muted into the surroundings, versus what we saw from some other ones that have been submitted in the past, where you blur it out, like all of a sudden the character's values kind of pop off from the background, just by even just with the simple blur. So I think getting the character brighter overall would be a good one, and allowing the character's brightness to kind of pop off from the background. And you can justify it because this character is in a pool of street lamp light. By looking at the position that he's in, whether or not it looks like he's kind of dominated by a light coming from in front. I question if it wouldn't make more sense to make the light more dominant from here, because he's pretty close to that one and kind of falling into the sphere of influence of that, versus the next one, because these lampposts look like they're spaced out pretty far. So I think that just having it with the closest one might be best. But so that being said, like there's a little bit of rim here. It would be really cool to get that to extend down throughout the hat and get some more wrapping around of the rim on the hat there, and then a rim on the character. In terms of the shadows, make sure you have those soften those up a little bit. Like this is a very sharp shadow shape. Yes, the street lamps do have a small radius. They have smaller bulbs, but they do pass through glass, and the glass definitely diffuses the light and creates a softer shadow situation. So to summarize it a little bit, the three big takeaways I would do for you is I would take your character and brighten him up overall. To get him to pop off, I'm just going to adjust the color here a little bit. Saturation, just because I brightened it so much. And get the character to read off the background a little bit more strongly. That's one. Number two is figure out the direction of the light source and making sure that makes sense in our scene, and that do we want the light coming in from this street lamp here? Something more like that. So it's more about the light coming in from behind, or you can also just shift the street lamps down a little bit and have it make sense that the light's coming in from the front of him, because and then watching out for the sharp shadows on the character, kind of softening those up as well. Two other tidbits that I should include in this. Number one is that this street lamp in particular, it feels flat, in that when you have these, again, there's a bulb or a candle, like depending on the era, there's a bulb or a candle that's kind of the central element of it, and you would see that be slightly brighter than the areas around the outside. And so it's kind of like there's a core element, and then it kind of fades off a little bit. Even when they're super bright and they're blown out and like there's no value, there's like nothing but white value, even then it's like super white at the middle, and then it kind of fades out a little bit around the edges. So make sure you try and get that look by you can even just add like a sphere with a glowy bit inside of there too, just to get that variation. So that's one extra tidbit. And the second extra tidbit is to pay attention. What we found, and this is something we found with this character specifically, is that the key to making him look good is getting the specularity right in his skin and in the wings and stuff. So like, still blurry. So like getting this specular value, making the wings feel really leathery and gross, and making the skin feel almost wet in its specular values. And same thing with this one, just it's a little small, but you can see like getting those specular values in there and in here, just getting the specular values in the wing, and again, getting that leathery look. That's kind of his core element of what makes bats. All right, guys. That is all for today. If you all have any other questions, feel free to chime in. And if not, we will call that our Monday critique, and I will get this uploaded to YouTube, and I will see you all very soon. All right.
Mike.
Hey, Ruby,
Sorry.
what's going on?
Hello, hi.
Hi.
I just got back yesterday.
Oh, welcome back.
I all my questions were about the lighting actually. So the lamps and the light bulbs of Clarissa kind of clarified a little bit my questions. But so you're saying that the best way to approach that is doing like point light?
So the way that I would do a street lamp like this, first thing would be like, obviously gather reference and you do all that. I wouldn't do the lighting as a point light. What I would do is have a spotlight shining out from about that position. But for the look of the light itself, I would find a way to create variation within the look of the lamp itself. Like I would take a sphere or an oval or something and stick it inside the lamp and then just have that glow a little bit from a shader perspective. Because what you're looking, because whenever you're dealing with an on-camera light source, you're dealing with two different things at the same time. And one of them is the actual look of the light, and the second one is kind of like it's the way that the lamp looks, and the second one is the way the light from that lamp is being distributed throughout the scene. So I deal with each one of those kind of individually. In that I would take this and just make like let's do much of a blur. I like something like this even. It might be too much of a blur, but something like this just to indicate that there's a little bit of a light source in there would be one of the main things I would do. And like I said, I would do that with the sphere that just kind of glows in the inside. And then for its influence on the scene, I would take a spotlight and probably, I guess it would be, yeah, I would depending on how I want this to go, maybe two spotlights, one that goes downward. This color so you can see it. Kind of one that starts at this point and shines like downward, and then maybe one that shines upward, depending on if I wanted to if I wanted to spray onto the buildings over there, I might tilt it a little bit this way, and then depending on, it could be even up to 3 lights with like one kind of showing what happens up here, one that kind of shines down on the ground, and then maybe one linked specifically to the character that's just hitting him here, and then kind of creating some rim around the sides there.
So would I unlink that to the post so I don't get the hard shadows, or
I would still make those I would make those spotlights with a big enough radius where they're kind of creating a softer shadow, because again with glass on these street lamps, they're not bare bulbs, so like that really diffuses light and allows the shadows to get a little softer. So I would just make that radius a little bit bigger.
All right. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I was doing like mesh lights too, but I was having some issues where, and like I do the IPR and it was like kind of glowing, and then I did like the test render, and it was like all flat, and I didn't get any of the glow. So I don't know like how to fix that, and it, like since you said like the mesh lights are not like the best way to go for it, so I'll just redo it. Yeah,
so I mean the mesh lights have their function. They do work well in some situations. I don't particularly use them that often, because like you said, because sometimes and I usually don't like to teach this because it's or I don't always say this right away, because I like to keep things kind of within the realm of believability, but I don't mesh lights are bad for 2 reasons. One, they create a lot of noise, because when you have to like turn them up, you really have to crank up their intensity sometimes, and by doing that you're just like the rays just get a little messy and they get real noisy. And the other one is like I don't want to have to change the look of the object and the resulting lighting at the same time if I don't have to. Like I like to control those things separately. So mesh lighting kind of takes that ability away from me a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's a great question.
Yeah, thanks.
All right,
Thank
cool.
you.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Well, welcome back, Ruby. And all right, everyone else, have a wonderful day. Enjoy your Monday, and I will see you all very soon. All right, happy lighting, guys.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.